Versailles, then you think about ESSEC Business School, you might imagine that the only link behind is that they are both French institutions. Well, this is maybe the roots, but there is much more than that. Indeed, when you think about heritage and innovation, which is indeed the core of the conference tonight, there is a lot of heritage. When you think about heritage, you might think about more Versailles than ESSEC. When you think about innovation, you might think more the business school than the Palace of Versailles. Well, this is false, because the windows behind you clearly show that Versailles, at the time, over the centuries, has actually been a place of innovation. When you think about the business school in the 21st century, very much oriented to innovation, but innovation actually has its roots in where we are today, where we come from. So one of our objectives is really to blend the local anchorage here with the global impact, to blend the innovation and the heritage. And actually both play a role in what we try to offer our students. Now we deal our links with companies and eventually, hopefully, a positive impact on society. So this is really the brief summary of the raison d'etre, of the purpose of this initiative. And tonight we have two speakers, one, Xavier Pavie, professor at ESSEC Business School, philosopher as well, you don't mind if I stress this point, I think it's important. He's the Associate Academic Director of the Grande École, our Master in Management, here in Singapore, at the origin of Imagination Week, which is a quite peculiar, specific pedagogical platform for our students, where the format is not being the classroom listening to a professor, but rather, as I like to say, being disturbed, being shaped by meeting philosophers, scientists, artists, and try to imagine, this Imagination Week, imagine what comes next. When you try to solicitate students' creativity, imagination, you have magnificent and unexpected outcome, but at the beginning it's very hard, because of course they like to be and sit in their comfort zone. When you try to ask them to get out of the comfort zone, of course, this is where the magic happens, but it's not that easy to make it happen. So thank you, Xavier, for that. And Christian, who is still very closely, strongly related to ESSEC alumnus, but it's not only alumnus, it's, I would say, an alumnus champion, if I can use the word. You are a very nice ambassador of ESSEC in the professional world. You've been in France before, in Singapore. Actually was at the origin of quite a few things. It's at the origin of this, because ESSEC has been exchanging with Chateau de Versailles with you, Chris, so thank you for helping us make it happen. And also, somehow at the origin, he was one of the actors, early 2000, when he was at the EDB in France, at the origin of our project of establishing a campus here. At the beginning were offices, a small room, a small classroom within the National Library building, and now we're very proud, with a lot of pride. Actually, we can affirm that it's a successful project. So you were at the origin of this. Thank you for your loyalty, but also for your engagement for ESSEC, Chris. And without further ado, I think the stars of the evening come on stage, and I hope you will enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincenzo, for the presentation and for the pressure that you put on our shoulder. Thank you very much. The purpose of the talk is actually in two parts, which is the first one about innovation and understanding what innovation means. So I hope that it won't be too academic, but at the same time, it's very important to go back to the definition of innovation. And I will try to explain to you innovation and heritage and how could we combine together. So that's the purpose of the first talk, my talk actually, and then I will leave the floor to Christian to discuss about this one as well, with another approach, which is more about what he's doing now. To do so, I would like to go back to the definition of innovation. Maybe you know the definition of innovation. Innovation comes from the Latin word. The Latin word innovare. Innovare, as we use it in English, from novare, meaning that change. You change something inside someone, for instance. So innovation, inside, novare, in Latin, change. You change something inside. And why do you need to change? It's very simple to understand. It's because you have some external pressure. external environment. So you need to transform yourself in order to do what? To survive. It's exactly what Charles Darwin mentioned. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change. You need to change yourself in order to survive. That's the case with your body, with our body, actually, the wisdom teeth that we have. We have to remove them, even though that was compulsory to get them, just to survive, just to have some food, some meat. That's exactly what happened in organization, in companies. In companies, you need to change yourself, you need to adapt yourself according to your environment. If you don't change yourself, if you resist, for instance, to change, you are just going to die. You won't survive. So even though you will resist, other competitors, your environment will force you to change or just to kill you. If you understand that, you understood what innovation means. It's just changing inside yourself in order to survive. This notion has been developed in academic world by Joseph Schumpeter. Joseph Schumpeter, the economist guy, Australian actually, in 1911, he said, innovation is the industrial exploitation of inventions and their disseminations, which give them the economic importance. That's the only definition that we have to remind when we talk about innovation. You can find plenty of definitions of innovation, but actually just one is really relevant, is this one. Why? Joseph Schumpeter explained that innovation is industrial exploitation of invention. So you need invention, you need idea. But idea itself is not enough. You need to exploit them. You need to industrialize your ideas and their dissemination. And at the end of the day, what is the most important thing is to have an economic importance. And that's why, for instance, when we talk about Uber, YouTube, or Airbnb, we truly believe that they are innovation, which is not true. They are not profitable. So, for instance, YouTube or Uber, for instance, that's an idea, definitely, dissemination for sure, industrialization, but not an economic importance. So that's very important to put that in perspective of what we can see around us. On top of that, Joseph Schumpeter explained that innovation can have 4 different types, 4 typologies. Product, everybody knows that, it's very classic, the product, the new. It's the process, how we do things. Even though at the end it will be the same thing, but the way to do things is different. The commercial categories of innovation. It's not just the product. Again, the process, commercialization, and organization. On top of that, we have 3 different degrees. The first one is very famous, most important one, maybe. It's incremental innovation. When you improve something, so for instance, the mic I just used just previously with the hand mic, I can use this one. It's just an incremental innovation, it's just a slight improvement. The second one, we call it radical innovation. Radical innovation is essentially when we use technology. So for instance, a tactical screen, a touch screen, it's a radical innovation. Electrical car, we can consider it as a radical innovation as well. The third category is paradigmatical innovation. It's essentially science, discovery. So the wheel, for instance, steam engine, internet, they are paradigmatical innovation. So now, if you combine the 4 categories and the 3 degrees, you have the strategic drive to innovate. Different typology, different degree. So innovation itself does not exist. Innovations, with an S, plural, exist. So for instance, in a company, we always have to think about the strategy of innovation. What kind of innovation do you want to use according to your competitors, your strategy? What do you want to achieve? You understand this point? Very simple, just to give you a flavor of what innovation is, a very simple introduction of it. The second word for today is the notion of heritage. What is a heritage? Heritage, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, heritage is defined as features belonging to the cultures of a particular society, such as traditions, language, or buildings that were created in the past and still have historical importance. Again, the definition, it is hence usually passed down from generation to generation as it is of great societal importance. So you can feel such as like a difference, such as many differentiation, maybe opposition between, on one hand, innovation, on the other hand, heritage. So the question behind that is how can incremental, disruptive, or radical, just to explain, paradigmatical product, process, commercialization, organization, the four categories, not endanger heritage? That's the question for this talk. To explain to you innovation and heritage, I would like to put in perspective the two sides. Singapore on one hand, and Versailles, surprise, on the other hand. So I will go through the different categories, the different degrees, just to see to what extent we can combine both heritage and innovation. The first one, product. The product, according to the definition, is launching a new or slightly improved item or services. That's the global definition of the product, the first category. Incremental. Very interesting to put in perspective what's happened in the former Supreme Court and the City Hall. What Singapore has decided to do? Basically, it's to combine both, thanks to the bridge. I don't know if you have the chance to go there, but they have decided to mix both in order to create the East Asian Arts New Hall. It's basically an incremental innovation. We use two different things, we put all together, we create a bridge to create something different, which is a new product. It's no longer the former Supreme Court, it's no longer the City Hall, it's something new that they improved. Incremental innovation. The second one is the radical innovation. The radical innovation, you can see that on different screen, just over there. It's how could we use techniques, science, in order to achieve something different. So for instance, 1785, that's the first hot air balloon. Second thing, the famous, we can call it right now, a lift, but that was a flying chair. And the flying chair that was for the mistress of Louis XIV, just to go from her room to his room, actually not the official one, you can imagine, but another one, and they used this kind of technique, which is considered today as the first lift ever. Radical innovation, when we include some techniques or mechanics. The third one, about the product, it's interesting to put in perspective what happened a few years ago, and it still continues to grow in this particular segment, which is the water desalination in Singapore. As you certainly know, water scarcity encouraged Singapore to find new solutions, and they developed different plans in order to find a way to stop the dependence of, I would say, neighboring countries, such as like Malaysia, where they get their own water. So by desalinating water, they are currently meeting 30%. It has been developed in Tuas, in Singapore. That's the most efficient water desalination plant in the world. So that's the first part. Understanding heritage, a few innovations, just dedicated on product. The second category is about the process. The process is how we do things. We don't care so much about the end, but the way we do things, again, setting up a new improved production or distribution methods. And again, I would like to use the same category. The first one, very famous, the famous Singapore math system. And everybody knows that because they are #1 in math as well as they are #1 in reading. But we have to keep in mind that when Singapore has decided to create these methods, they use all the methods from foreign country and they put all together, which is basically a new way methods of math. Incremental innovation. At the end of the day, we have just to do math. So process. Another interesting thing is when Louis XIV has decided to go from Paris, from the Louvre actually, to Versailles, which is basically a barren land, which is actually nothing. And they have decided to create something different, very big castle with lots of gardens and so on. The problem is what? How is it possible to think about the architecture without any tools to do so? So for instance, the Picard cycle, this one, has been dedicated to understand the rotation of the planets. And that for the very first time, they use this kind of tools in order to make some big building and gardens. The third one it's paradigmatical one, Versailles as well. And they created an impressive underwater to fuel Versailles fountain. There is no water in Versailles at all. And they have decided to redrive, to remanage actually the water in order to put some river, some flood actually into the gardens of Versailles with a specific mechanism. And still today, they remain and they still use this kind of process, the second one. The third category, it's setting up a selling process that implies significant changes in creation, packaging, place, promotion, which is the commercialization. Again, the Schumpeter's definition. The first example is Singapore business promotion. 1961, the finance minister, Dr. Kwok Win Sui, said the Economic Development Board passed this week the beginning of EDB. Vincenzo has mentioned EDB, and EDB, the purpose of EDB is to lead a government agency planning for executing strategy to enhance in Singapore. So actually, they have decided to develop Singapore outside of Singapore. They have decided to create what? An ecosystem to promote Singapore, to find brilliant partners around the world in order to bring them competence, talent inside Singapore. And still today, they have 18 international offices in 12 countries. Incremental innovation and commercialization. Second one, very famous, Sir Thomas Raffles. He has decided how could we compete with other countries nearby. Of course, Malaysia, which is actually together with Singapore, but also Indonesia and so on. He has decided to create a preference, thanks to what? The Free Trade Agreement. And the Free Trade Agreement has been established by Sir Thomas Raffles in 1919. And today, still today, Singapore has more than 20 free trade agreements just in order to attract and to compete with what? With their own competitors nearby. Exactly the definition I mentioned to you at the beginning to understand it. The third one, of course, that's where we are. Versailles 3D exhibition. What is the purpose if not how to promote Versailles outside of Versailles? Exactly what Amy has mentioned, for their own. So actually, Versailles has decided to create this kind of space for what? Of course, to promote themselves. To sell Versailles outside Versailles and to attract them to come to Versailles. That's the third category. The last one, organization. The Organization for Innovation is setting a new organization methods in the process, the workplace, or external link with organizations. The first one, again, incremental innovation. Incremental innovation organization. When Singapore has been created, 1965, they have decided to combine different communities, different population. But one of the most important points that was about the religion. And they have decided to integrate all of them and to develop. And that's why they have decided to create this inter-religion organization in Singapore. And Singapore is very well known across the world for this kind of harmony between the different religions. It's the Harmony Act was established in 1990s after the Presidential Council in order to preserve this religion harmony. The second, about organization, it's important as well in Versailles, is how could we use mechanics behind the scene. The architects, Jean-Jacques Gabriel, incorporate latest innovation to enable to opera to convert into ballroom or a hall for feast. So behind the scenes, try to find the mechanics, organization they want to do. It's not a question of a new product, not a question of commercialization or process, but a new organization behind the scene, as you can imagine in companies as well. And the third and last one, Singapore space timing. How could we deal with this kind of very small city? How is it possible to expand the cities? If it's not, how could we have a reclaimed land? So over the past 2 centuries, Singapore land area has expanded by a whopping 25% just to get some land over the sea. So just in a few minutes, you understood, I hope so, what innovation means and how we can combine innovation with an organization such as like Versailles, such as another one, which is Singapore, and how could we find the product, process, commercialization, organization, incremental, radical, and very vertical with those kind of ideas over the 200 years. To conclude, without innovation, there would be no heritage. It's not a question of opposition, but a question of how could we deal with innovation in order to survive, as I mentioned, and in order to survive thanks to innovation. How could we mix both, which is something very complex. And the organization should understand this kind of, I would say, this kind of blend between heritage and innovation. Innovation is finding new ways of preserving, transmitting traditions, language, and building as well. Updates and improved transmission of heritage through new technology, which is just a mean in order to survive. Broaden civilization's horizon and improve their way of life, which liberates them from certain force. And that's the last sentence. Even create some ways for new kinds of heritage. Heritage and innovation comes together. We have to innovate to preserve heritage, as well as heritage is the roots, or are the roots for innovation. Thank you very much. So we have time to discuss after. Christian, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Professor, for the presentation. I think it was really very enlightening. So now in another area, which is in the area of retail. So myself, I'm the Deputy Managing Director of Capital Land, and I've been heading Art Orchard until May this year. So in terms of knowing this location as well, maybe before I start, I would like to give a little bit of the background about how this virtually Versailles came about too. So last year, when we got the meeting with Versailles, we were excited because they wanted to do a digital presentation of Versailles in Singapore. So where we are at right now, we are at the tallest point of Orchard Road, and this is also a location of significance because in the past, this was an orchard plantation, which is why it's called Orchard Road. So being on the tallest point of Orchard Road, with its significance, we thought what better way to present the beautiful and magnificent views of Versailles using the elevator which you took when you came out. So that was also one of the little points of innovation when we renovated this location 2 years back. And with that, we are very happy that finally, after 1 year of hard work and the hard work of the different teams from both Versailles, ESSEC, and ION, this became a reality and is open to all in Singapore to enjoy. So innovation. So to me, innovation is really about life because the most profound technologies are those that disappear and they weave themselves into a fabric of everyday life until they're indistinguishable from it. So if you really think about it and you look around yourself, you find that a lot of things that you use today, even though they might have been invented, they might have been made many years ago, if they're still around, it means that they are relevant to our daily life, it's relevant to what we're doing, so much so that it has become part and parcel of our life itself. So just a word of introduction about Capital Land. Today, we have a large network all over, and it is the largest mall network in Singapore with different shopping centers. So our business for Capital Land Retail is in shopping malls. But when you look at some of the shopping malls location, they are also of a certain historical significance. So for example, Raffles City, Singapore, a lot of people probably do not realize that that was also the location of the first school that was founded by Raffles himself, Raffles Institution. And today, while it has changed many locations, this is where the name Raffles was inspired from. And on the left, you look at Plaza Singapura. It is one of the oldest malls in Singapore, and next year you'll be celebrating its 45th years. And Bugis used to be a location where there was a lot of different activities in terms of the cultural significance as well. So for Singaporeans with historical knowledge, you know that that represents a very interesting part of Singapore. So in terms of the innovation initiatives, what we are looking at right now is an interesting infinity loop, whereby we are looking at how technology is not just an enabler, but technology itself is really the new way that we do business. So empowering business using different technologies, from the use of Wi-Fi, beacon, and on the right side, delighting customers in terms of the experience. These are the two key focuses that we are looking at. And in the middle is really about delighting customers through a loyalty program. So all these things may sound very technical and it's all related to business. What's really important is, well, right now everyone is discussing, is retail dying? I think this is a very interesting question that we can discuss, because retail is really about life itself. It will never go away, but the form in which it happens, the way we do businesses will change. And which is why right now, every day we are looking at articles in the newspapers, we're discussing, are we going to go online? Are we just going to all shop online, and everybody just going digital? But as what Professor Zabit says, heritage is about preserving a certain aspect of our heritage, a certain aspect of our cultures, a certain aspect of the way we live. So if we were to go totally, fully online, then we'll lose an aspect of what we do in the physical world. So our take is that rather than switching fully onto a digital online world, we are looking at how we can integrate and bring that convenience to the physical world. So at Iron Orchard, we've also been looking at different ways in which we can delight and innovate to delight our tourists. So experiences for the tourists includes introduction of a food and heritage trail. So what it means is that every day, tourists can come and they can learn about the different types of food, they can learn about the different art pieces which have significance in terms of heritage. So the inspiration of Iron Orchard itself was from the nutmeg, because many, many years ago, this location was full of nutmeg trees. So this served as the backdrop for the inspiration of the architectural design. So the core of the shopping center is really the fruit, and the power on top of it is the stem that grows from the fruit. And for this location, Iron Sky, during the renovation, we're also thinking about how we can relate it back to history. So every day, when we started this experience, we brought a multimedia experience showcasing the past, present, and future. So all these images were linked together. Multimedia experience for all to enjoy in the normal periods of its operations. So in terms of the future of retail, we are looking at a few things. So one of it is that retail in the future is not just going to be a linear experience. What this means is that currently when you shop, you're going from one shop to another, from one boutique to another. But retail is going to be a lifestyle moving ahead. So we will be having the interactions between the different brands. So by putting them together, we are talking about co-retailing, about co-experiences, and this is going to be the way that shopping will become. So in a location like Funan, which we're opening next year, we'll be looking at new experiences such as the Tree of Life. So this is an experience. We are bringing in different activity pods, we're bringing in different open spaces where different retailers can come together and create different products, and this is also going to be one way whereby we can showcase retailers and shoppers interacting together. So in that sense, this is how we view the new way of how everybody can become a retailer in just 5 minutes. So this is also something that we are very excited about. And one of the new experiments that we're looking at in retail is also the introduction of an urban farm. So on the top level of the shopping mall, we're going to have one of the largest urban farm in the central district of Singapore. And there will be opportunities for all the restaurants to take advantage of the ingredients, and this will be a farm-to-table concept. So some of the questions that we always ponder about is, how do millennials shop today, Can there be synergy between the online and the offline? Will online retailers overtake traditional retail in the next 5 years, for example? And what should shopping malls do for their shoppers and the retailers? So recently, we've started to introduce a new retail concept in Singapore, and it's called Nomads. So in this concept, we look at shoppers and not just shoppers themselves, but it's about creating a community. So this is one of the ways in which we want to introduce the differentiation compared to what in the past we do, because shopping is no longer going to be just an interactive experience, but it's going to be more of a lifestyle where we know more about you. So some of the technology that we've introduced includes the facial recognition, where we gamify an onboarding process, and through the games that you play, we'll be able to separate you into different tribes or different groups of interest. We also use projection walls where it's interactive, and you can compare the different products. You can look at new information when you look at the comparisons. And we're looking at modular plug-and-play stores. So what it means is that within just one day, within just a couple of nights, you can change the entire look of a store. You can change the whole range of products, and this will entice a whole new generation of retailers. And this brings back to my earlier point that retail in the future is not just about the big companies bringing their same standard products, but any one of us with an interesting product, with an interesting idea, can become a retailer over the next couple of months. And I think this is where the excitement will come in. And in terms of the interactive directories, we have also introduced a next generation of interactive directories, whereby your customized products based on your profiles, based on your characteristics, will be pushed and customized to you in terms of the journey. And that has also been getting a lot of attraction. It's one of the more talked about newest trend in town right now. So what it really means also for retail, and these are some of the points that we have pondered, is that for retail, search has clearly gone online, but the permanence of disruption in retail is going to stay, and it's going to be one of the constant challenges, but also an interesting challenge that keeps retail interesting for the next cycles. And also right now, the strength of mall has also shifted from brands to the hands of the consumers, which is yourselves, because all of us are consumers, all of us are shoppers in our own rights, and we are the ones that will dictate how the products and the brands will turn out more and more. So this is actually
yeah.
So I think we'll open up to Q&A.
Yeah, discussion or remark. We have to sit. Yeah. So if you have critics, remarks, whatever you want about the presentation that we...
I think it's two very different kind of discussions.
I like yours.
But, well, I mean, you know, it's very open to all to discuss it. Any comments?
Yes, please. We need the mic? Or? Yeah. Thank you.
Question for you actually. There are many different interpretations of heritage, right? There is no one single definition. So how do you capture different versions in your instrument?
Of heritage? Yeah, you're right, it's not very easy. And actually, to be totally transparent with you, I can define clearly innovation because my background in research are innovation, but about heritage, that was a bit complex to me. You know, when we discussed about the topic for tonight, said about heritage. What is heritage? You know, I can find many definitions of heritage. So it's not very easy. So I try just to go back to some official definition of heritage. That's what I mentioned, the Cambridge Dictionary, which is the official definition of heritage. But you're right, heritage is something, it's continuing to move. You know, it's something not static. It's something that always in flow, it's moving and changing. So heritage is not something static, even the definition of the word itself. So we cannot say heritage is this. Heritage is something just moving around always. Not very easy to think about the question, but not very easy to answer for that.
I think just to add, heritage is something which we all have the power to decide, because what is the heritage of tomorrow is basically what we decide to preserve today. So it really depends on the importance that you place. And I think the future generations of what they see is a direct result of what today we decide to prioritize as to keep and preserve.
And that's why easily actually when I started to work on to find that innovation and heritage come always together. If you want just to preserve heritage, to preserve something already exists, you need to innovate just to make it possible for the futures, to make it sustainable, and to make sure that it will continue to preserve. That's exactly the case what's happened with what Vincenzo mentioned about ESSEC Business School. ESSEC has been created in 1907, but we spent all years just to innovate. But still today we preserve this heritage from the past and the DNA, of course, of the business school. Anything else that was here enough?
Yes, I've got a question. Just to what extent are you liaising with government to help with your heritage and innovation?
I think we're always in conversation with the government. So for example, when we decided to make this location the tallest point of Orchard Road, well, it is the tallest point of Orchard Road, but we wanted to make this location more of an attraction. So we approached the tourism board, we approached our urban regional authority, URA, and we were having a lot of discussions. So again, back to my point that it really depends on what you see as important. So I think in terms of the engagement, there's always the process of highlighting the importance, the process of highlighting what we value as interesting and of cultural significance.
Some research mentioned that when we asked to CEO of company, who is responsible of innovation? And they said, it's me. Because innovation is really related to the power. It's exactly what I tried to mention with Louis XIV, because he tried to develop plenty of innovation, but actually he was responsible of innovation. The science, the hot air balloon, for instance, the leaf, and a lot of science, for instance. Innovation and powers come together, always. Very, very important question. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you for the insightful presentation. I was triggered by the last slide where you were stating that innovation preserves languages. Because at first glance I thought that innovation endangered languages. By the way I see it, that we have a lot of real-time translator, if it's vocal or written, and I have a concern that languages may disappear. So could you elaborate on this?
It's not very easy to answer. Innovation comes with resistance as well, and we don't want to change. Most of the time, we like to change. We like the change for others instead of us. We don't want to change. So actually, when we want to preserve something, the question is, why do you want to preserve it? And most of the time it is because it is inside your comfort zone. And you don't want to be outside of your comfort zone because you don't know what happened outside of your comfort zone. So actually people like innovation, but they don't want to change, which is very paradoxical and a bit schizophrenic as well, because you like to change, but you don't want to change yourself, and you resist that. It's exactly what happened maybe today in France with the famous Gilets jaunes and this kind of situation that you have, and you can see some resistance. We don't want to change. We want to continue to use our car as it has been the case. We used the car the last century. We don't want to change. We don't want to have a new approach, have something different. We have always innovation with a resistance. We don't want to change or to put ourselves outside of the comfort zone. And the reason is very simple. We don't know what's going on outside of the comfort zone. So when I don't see what's happened, I'm in a tricky situation. I'm not in a comfortable situation. So I don't want to do that, so I prefer to resist. Innovation is always like that. Always a question of resistance, the question of how is it possible to change, and most of the time I don't want. I like innovation or to change for others, but I don't to transform myself. Because I don't know what's going on with this. And again, it's something that you can find inside the company as well as for yourself. You have to change, but Schumpeter explained it very clearly. You have with innovation the notion of creative destruction. And creation and destruction come together as well. If you want to create something, you have to destroy something. You cannot do both. And creation and destruction come together all the time. So you have to accept, to choose, to destroy something in order to build. But when you start to build something, you don't see if it will become a wall or a church, a cathedral, or something different. A very easy question.
Thank you for the presentation, very interesting. I have a question. So technology now is redefining how we experience and disseminate culture, our heritage, and we know a lot of innovative, compelling projects, blending arts, culture and technology. So as you are presenting a business school, could you more tell about business potential of such interactions? And for Chris, I have a question about this tree of
Tree of life.
Yes, please. Yeah, could you tell more about this center?
So the Tree of Life, which I mentioned, will be at the shopping mall that is going to be completed next year, Funan. And it is a location where you can choose to be there for a month, for 3 months, or long term. But the key point is that you just put your goods, you rent the space, and you can sell whatever you want. And you can also make the goods on the spot, and that becomes an interaction with the shoppers. So the shoppers feel like they're part of the whole process. So they can actually see the things that they're going to buy being made. And I think that's, you know, the inspiration for the Tree of Life, because it's something that's living, something that's alive.
It's going to be open?
It's going to be in the second quarter, around May next year.
About your question, it's very important to keep in our mind that digitalization is not the end of itself. Digitalization is just a tool. So for instance, for a business school, if we develop the amazing business school, the digital business school, for instance, people don't care to get their courses online, to get their apps, to get whatever they want, if the content itself is not relevant, if the professors are not rigorous, if the research are not relevant or distinctive to our competitors. So we have to be careful of that all the time. Digitalization, that's also the case for a very simple service like Uber or Grab, for instance. If the service is not relevant, if the service is not appropriate, the digitalization, the tool itself, we don't care about it. And sometimes, you know, that's, we can say in French, that l'arbre qui cache la forêt, the tree that's hidden the forest. The digitalization could be bright, could be amazing, could be an amazing website, an amazing apps, but if the content is not here, it's just useless. And for a business school, and I'm talking under my dean and president is there, you know, so I need to be careful about what I'm saying about that. The excellence of the business school is not the tools, it's not the website, it's not the apps, it's not the digitalization, but it's the faculty, the research, it's the good students, and how could we make it profitable, of course, just to be sustainable. It's not, we are just an association, so we're not profitable at all. It's not the purpose to be profitable. It's just to have an equilibrium, to be sustainable, to continue to survive. But the tools are supposed to be technological one, or supposed to be in a classroom. At the end of the day, it's the content. And how can we help the students to grow?
That's why I believe that the heritage and the technology is a
Absolutely.
perfect match. Yeah.
Absolutely. business school is perfectly a very good example of heritage of the content, of the rigorous, of the excellence. On the other hand, the innovation that we have to use in order to promote the content.
Good evening. Thank you for your talk. I would like to know, do you think that the future, the retail shopping will become heritage? Because do you think the retail shopping will become heritage one day?
Well, I think, like I was saying, the key question which a lot of journalists right now are asking is retail dying? So what we have seen, at least right now, in the latest numbers, the retail sales index of Singapore still shows that 5% of all sales are online, which means that 95% of people still prefer to shop offline. And in the recent surveys that we did, we also found that, number one, 70% of people who shop online prefer to do it on their mobile phone, and 70% of these people prefer to have in-store pickup. And in China, we've also seen that there were some cosmetic brands whereby they have an unmanned store, which means that you can use your mobile phone, you can buy, there's nobody in the store selling cosmetics, and the exact same brand just next door with the beauty assistants, the sales girls, and the sales are much higher. So I think we are all human beings and we need the human touch, and I think certain products will do very well online, but certain products we still prefer it here. And I think for shopping mall, what it means is that we will increasingly become, I mentioned, a lifestyle. So when you go shopping, unlike in the past, you are not shopping for necessity things anymore because you probably prefer to buy them online. If you buy the big bags of, like the large detergents, the heavy things, you probably buy online. But when you come out, you want to enjoy, you want to experience new products, you want to try new experiences. So collaborations like this, like virtual Versailles will become very interesting, and we want to do more of such experiences because it allows people to see new things without traveling all the way to France, and we can do new things with other partners as well.
But the next generation that have it, they like offline.
Yeah, I think the next generation, they have different habits, so things will change, but as we prepare for the future, we must always forget that if we were to take a quantum leap, sometimes things will fail. I just read an article yesterday, a discussion with the management of IBM in one of the newspapers in New York, saying that almost 45% of all new innovations end up in failure when they try to do something too fast, too quick.
It's the last question then.
Sorry, just two questions. One question on heritage. Heritage, in order to carry on, right, you need to make the youngsters interested. So, probably how, other than all these high-tech innovations, how do you really make the next generation interested in this heritage program? And the other question is actually on retail, right? The Nomex at Plaza Sing, right? Recently, you all work with Taobao, which actually do which is what most users do. That they actually go to retail to look at the item, then they actually go online to purchase. So, what's the actual findings from there, and what we can share with us if that's the future of retail? Thanks.
So maybe I just talk a little bit about the Taobao shop at the Nomads. So it is the first physical store that they have done in Singapore, and it's barely 1 month because we started being open officially on the 8th of November. So today it's about just slightly more than a month, and they're preparing for the 12/12 campaign. So how it works is that when you go to the store, there's nobody, but you scan the products that you like. So everything is for sale, and it's kind of like a showroom. So we see that there's a lot of people who browse, who try out the products, and what we have seen so far, even though it's a very short period of time, is that as long as you constantly change the products, you get people to come back. And it's also one of the new ways in which shoppers enjoy shopping. Because initially we thought that if you were to do something like that, then what is it online that you can't get offline? So probably, related to your earlier question, right? Even when people like to shop online, when you have a physical space, you find that you have new customers, you have new people looking at new things.
About the first question about heritage and the generation of heritage, or what kind of new heritage we can get. Actually, what is very important is for the future. The problem is most of the time we are, crushed by innovation. We don't think about innovation. We use innovation, and that's the main problem. If you think about what you do and why you do the things you do, you will start to think about heritage and what kind of heritage. Definitely, it's not an opposition between innovation and heritage. But how could we use innovation in order to preserve or develop the heritage that we want? Thank you. Thank you very much.